Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you know, and welcome back to another video. I was gonna film a Christmas book tag today, but unfortunately my laptop's not cooperating and I have bad memory, and so I can't just remember all the questions, so sorta gonna have to film something else today. So I thought, since Christmas is coming up and Christmas, a lot of that is gifts, I was trying to think like what are things that I would want as gifts, how could I incorporate this into a video, and I was like, hey, a lot of books that I want to be gifted this Christmas are fantasy books, so I thought why not do a fantasy book recommendation video. I have a ton of fantasy recommendations. This is not a video with just 4. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think? 13 recommendations. Some of these are popular, some of these are not so popular. These are all ones that I would recommend if they sound interesting to you. So without further ado, let me get into the recommendations. My first recommendation is Unenchanted by Han. I have 2 copies actually of this whole entire series that is signed by the author. I got this from a auction, I believe, and I enjoyed this series. This series is sort of a fantasy retelling series. So the main character, Mina, is a descendant from the Brothers Grimm, and sort of like a curse unfolds from there. She has to deal with some unfinished business from this curse. It's a very fun read. I highly recommend this one if you are into fantasy retellings. My next recommendation is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, but hear me out, okay? So not everyone is into Twilight. Like, I fully get that. It does have its problems, but I highly recommend reading this to make fun of it and laugh at it because it makes it so much more enjoyable. If you're reading this because you're expecting this masterpiece, you aren't going to enjoy it, but if you're reading it for something like funny and cringy that you can laugh about, you will enjoy it, because that's the way that I've been enjoying the Twilight series. I haven't been taking it too seriously. I've just been laughing at the cringy moments and having fun reading it, and it makes it so much more enjoyable. I'm not going to describe what Twilight is about because I'm pretty sure all of you know what it is about, but it is a fantasy/paranormal series that I highly recommend because I am enjoying it. But check trigger warnings for this series because there are some triggers throughout this series. Next up is Magic by Angie Sage. This is one that is sort of a high fantasy. It's very intense. I would say that this is more middle grade, but I did really enjoy it when I read it. It's a really fun read that is perfect for all ages. And next up is one that is insanely popular, but hear me out for why I'm including it in this video. So this book is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's/Sorcerer's Stone. But hear me out, okay? I have had a decent number of people recently comment on my TikToks, comment on different Goodreads things, and say that they have not read the series. It's 2021, how have you not read the Harry Potter series? So if you are wanting to read the series, I highly recommend getting into it. It's the perfect time to get into it. The world is so stressful with COVID right now, but Harry Potter is the perfect comfort read to like snuggle up in there and have fun. And if you don't want to give any money to the author, I highly recommend buying this series used because the series has been out for such a long time that there is tons of used copies available online and in bookstores, and you can read the series without giving money to the author, so just keep that in mind if you are not a fan of the author. My next recommendation is Carrier of the Mark by Leigh Fallon. So I want to start off by saying that this is somewhat of a Twilight ripoff. However, I did enjoy this one. I would say read this one before Twilight because then you won't be as frustrated. This book sort of feels like Twilight, but this book is sort of like Twilight in some sense, but it's more about like magic instead of vampires and werewolves, and this is a very fun read that I highly recommend you read if you're interested in fantasy books. It's been a year or 2 since I've read this one, but I believe it takes place in Ireland, which is a fun setting. My next recommendation is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, which is actually one that I didn't get into until recently, and this was one that you can fly through really quickly. It's really fun. I actually feel like it's perfect to read during the Christmas season because there's so much like candy in there, and when I think of Christmas, one of the things that comes up is stockings with candy in it. So I highly recommend reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory during this Christmas season. Very quick, fun read, and I know that I don't have the greatest cover of this book, and like it's from a library, like it's a discarded library book, but my cat peed on my other copy of the book, and so I just had to get another one because I wanted one. Cats are very special because sometimes they'll pee on your books, sometimes they'll smack your eyeballs. My cat did last night. You know, very special. They're just fun creatures. My next recommendation is Collateral Damage, which is actually one of the prettiest books that I own, so I'm like super obsessed with the cover and everything. It's by Taylor Simmons. This is a superhero book that is very fun and light, and I flew through it really quickly. I recommend this one if you're into superheroes and into like fun, lighthearted stuff because it's not super deep, but it is one that's very good to help you escape from the real world. Look at how pretty my edition is. I'm so obsessed. I got this edition from Fake Crate, so I don't know if you can still get it, but it's so pretty, and this book is so underrated. My next recommendation is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This is part of the Mortal Instruments series. Definitely check trigger warnings with the Shadowhunters world, but this world is such a good world for escapism. And if you aren't a fan of the sort of trigger warning thing that makes people uncomfortable about this series, there is plenty of other series in the Shadowhunters universe. There's the Infernal Devices, the Dark Artifices, there's all these different ones in this world, so if you're interested in this world but the original series doesn't interest you, you can easily read one of the spin-offs and understand it completely without reading the Mortal Instruments series. But I did really enjoy the Mortal Instruments series. I finished it this year. I would just say maybe stop after the 5th book if you can stop yourself, because I didn't like the final book, but the rest of the series, good. A little bit cringy in parts, but still enjoyable. My next recommendation is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This is a duology that is now complete, and it is an enemies to lovers. It's very good. There's a lot of fun steamy scenes in here. Not steamy in terms of like spicy, but like steamy, if that makes any sense. The little phrase that's always used with this book that really got me interested in this book, that I feel like will get a lot of people interested in this book, says, "People lived because she killed. People died because he lived." So it's really good. There's an assassin, there's magic, there's a magical artifact that they have to go get. It is so good. Next recommendation is Aragon by Christopher Paolini. This is one that's a little like tougher to get through, so if you're not into high fantasy, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one, but I did enjoy this one, and it is about dragons, so if you're into dragons, definitely check this one out. Shout out to the guy on Twitter who called me a cuss word because I have the movie edition of the book. It's 99 cents at Goodwill. Like, why would I spend $10 for a better looking copy when I can get a 99-cent copy? But yeah, shout out to that guy. I'll never forget you for calling me a female dog because I have the movie copy. It was just very special, you know? My next recommendation is The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. This is one with Egyptian mythology. If you're not into Egyptian mythology, Rick Riordan obviously has a ton of different series. He has the Percy Jackson, which is Greek gods. He has books for the Norse gods. Personally, Red Pyramid is my favorite one out of all the books that I've read by him. And if you're not into the mythology that he writes about, he has Rick Riordan Presents, which is he's giving a platform for marginalized authors to be telling their stories. So there's tons of stuff to read in this like Rick Riordan universe. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Rick Riordan book universe. So I highly recommend checking out something by Rick Riordan because they're all fantasy, and this one I highly recommend because I feel like a lot of people just forget about this one and focus just on Percy Jackson, but this one is just as good as Percy Jackson, if not better. My next recommendation is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This series recently wrapped up, so you can binge read the whole series. It's a series that involves like present day, historical day, fantasy. It is so good. I highly recommend it, and in case you aren't familiar with this series, there is old pictures in here that complement the story that make it a very fun and unique read. And my final recommendation, I told you there was a lot of books that I was going to be recommending in this video, and I did not lie. My final recommendation is Beautiful Creatures by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. I have been working my way through this series this year, so I've read all of the original series, and I just have one novella left in the spin-off series that I'll be reading as my next read, and then I'm done with this universe. This universe is so fun. It is a fantasy witchy universe. Not witches, they're technically casters, but I'm gonna say witches because everyone knows what witches is. Not everyone knows what casters are. So I really enjoy the Beautiful Creatures series. It's a forbidden love series that's young adult set in the south of the United States, and it's very enjoyable, so I recommend this one. So those were all of my fantasy recommendations. I obviously have read more fantasy books than that, and I've enjoyed more fantasy books than that, but I just decided to talk about these ones today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. It's coming close to the end of the year, but I will still be uploading 3 videos per week until the end of the year, and then my schedule is going to be changing a little bit in the new year. I'm going to be talking about that early in January because some things will be changing with my channel. I hope all of you are having a great week, and I hope all of you are excited for Christmas, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you're just having a fun festive season. If you don't celebrate any holidays, I hope your winter's been fun. My cat wants to help with the outro. She says, "Goodbye, everyone."